state. We have manufacturers in small towns of several thousand people, but because of because of general aviation aircraft in that airport, they can connect their suppliers and their purchasers with that manufacturing facility. And otherwise, we would see the demise, the greater demise of rural communities across Kansas. In that regard, in light of what I said about the CR and shutdowns, I am the sponsor of the DeFazio bill in the House. That is somewhat contrary, I suppose, to my role as an appropriator, in which we look for every excuse to get us back operating once we shut down. And while there could be an argument that if we provide relief to the FAA and keep them operating during the shutdown, that we will have less leverage in getting us out of a shutdown. The damage that occurs during the shutdown, to me, is the most significant issue here. And if we can avoid damage at the FAA and in aviation, we saw in an earlier shutdown in which the ability to certify the sale of an aircraft manufactured in Kansas, waiting on the certificate in Oklahoma City, had hundreds of millions of dollars of aircraft sitting on runways and concrete slabs of Kansas, waiting for the arrival of a government that was functioning. And then the aspect of safety, we want our air traffic controllers at work, and I've never seen any evidence that they intended to walk off their jobs. They're very loyal and dedicated to the cause. It may be that when TSA was no longer able to meet the demands during the shutdown, that may be a precipitating factor getting us all together to get a shutdown concluded. I'd like to avoid all that, and we're very interested in seeing the passage of the Aviation Funding Stability Act, the DeFazio bill in the House. Lots of conversation now about manufacturing certification. ODA remains an important component of the way I look at how we're going to be able to meet the technological changes, the demand in markets to advance innovation. I'm of the view that the FAA doesn't have the capabilities to certify every new product and bring products to market, and that we have to rely on the private sector with the FAA oversight to do this correctly. We will continue to be an advocate for whatever changes we might determine are necessary as a result of facts as they arise. But the idea that we're going to turn, we've been working for more than a decade to try to get more authority to rest in the private sector in certification, not less, and we don't intend to turn our back on that issue. So that process is critical to an industry that has the opportunity to innovate and advance. We would be in serious trouble if we were relying only upon the FAA. I would tell you that NASA, the next giant leap, we're excited. We will work hard to see that the appropriations are sufficient for the moon shot and the goal of having a woman on the moon in the near future, and using that as a path to Mars. And we've been vocal and supportive of the administration, President Trump, and particularly Vice President Pence and Administrator Bridenstine's goal in that regard. I see this, let me add one thought to that. Senator Warner and I have reintroduced our Aeronautics Innovation Act. These two things tie together. There's reasons for us to go to the moon. There's reasons for us to go to Mars. One of the things that is compelling to me is, and I, perhaps it's just as a citizen of my state, but certainly as the goal is there that we find ways to encourage young men and women who are interested in science and mathematics and engineering and research to pursue an education and pursue training and to pursue careers in this arena. And Senator Warner and I have reintroduced our Aeronautics Innovation Act, designed to create a workforce for NASA and its future. And we need to do everything we can to highlight it. And a moonshot will be great. I'm old enough and older than many in this room to recognize the role that the landing on the moon played in inspiring people to pursue careers in aerospace and aviation. And we need that moment again. I'm also a product of the time in which I thought our country was pretty divided. As a teenager, it seemed I remember asking my dad if he thought America was going to survive. There were tumultuous times in the 60s and 70s. It seems that things are still very divided today, And space, and particularly a moonshot, is something that can bring Americans together with inspiration and unity, and that would be a very desirable thing for our nation. So I'd be happy to take the conversation in whatever direction you'd like for it to go, and take your questions, comments. And there is no chicken fried steak today, but I'd be glad to hear what you have for me to know. Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. Ron from the Aero Club of Washington.
Oh, right.
First of all, thank you for one of our original sponsors of the industry-wide effort to get a workforce training program established for maintenance technicians. In that spirit, we're still looking for appropriations. It's based on community-level engagement, partnerships between schools and businesses. You obviously come from a place of great aviation heritage. What have you experienced in terms of the strength of the industry in your home state that we can use industry-wide as a good example to build this kind of local partnership?
I appreciate the way that you asked the question, but I would tell you that it's a challenge in Kansas and every place in the country to have the necessary motivated, trained, and educated workforce. And I was remiss in my comments about those who want to pursue careers in aerospace and aviation, somewhat suggesting that that was about higher degrees and a PhD in engineering. Those are important features that our country desperately needs, both from our homegrown intellect and talent, but also from those who come here with PhDs in engineering and science from elsewhere. But it was remiss on my part not to highlight the importance of technical and vocational education in middle school, in high school, community colleges, and technical colleges. I'm of the view that perhaps in the days gone by, we attracted or retained a business in Kansas or in another state in this country by the tax incentives, the things that we can do to induce somebody to come or to stay. I think the most motivating factor to grow the economy and to have a business locate or remain in your state is a workforce that is educated and trained. And I would say, I've said in Kansas many times, that we often underemphasize community college and technical education. We believe, again, this is the rural guy in me saying, we believe to be a success, you've got to go away. And the reality is that we send often our best and brightest away when success can be had at home, both in education and in careers. And so I think that there is a significant effort I think there's a recognition of this in Wichita. There is a significant effort at training and educating. It is getting to those classrooms at early stages in school life, and it is about providing the mentorship that occurs between somebody who is in that profession, in that career, and that student. Again, we need to change the attitude of parents. We need to change the attitude of teachers and school counselors. Success can be that individual who can meet the needs of the aviation industry. And our country has a lot to gain by highlighting that. Wichita Tech, which is part of Wichita State University, their president has been appointed by the president to his Tech and Workforce Council. And they are, their work to date suggests to me that this administration sees the value of technical education. You might remind me where the appropriations for the bill will rest.
We have it through the House.
Okay. And you're waiting on who in the Senate? Okay, it's transportation. All right. That was my question. I wanted to make sure it wasn't mine. I was trying to be subtle. We'd be happy to have a conversation with Senator Collins. Anything else? You're an easy audience, thank you. If there are any companies who would like me to visit their plants, and if those companies are located in flatland and prairie, I'm anxious to come visit. Thank you, Beth.
Oh, come on.
Thank you very much for speaking at the Aero Club, and look forward to hopefully another time. Thank you.
Well,
And I will tell you that something that I'm sure none of you have observed, that senators are very self-centered people. So I've had a conversation, I think, with 99 colleagues. And while the question usually starts out of raising the topic about me, the question will generally be, well, what happened to you? And about 2 sentences or less into my description of what happened to me, I've now heard 99 stories of what happened to them. There are plenty of senators who've had events in their lives and are willing to share them with anyone injured and captured in a wheelchair. It's incapable of escaping. It's a real pleasure to be here with this group. Aviation and aerospace is important to me as a member of Congress, as a senator from Kansas. It is a hugely significant component of our state's economy. We are working hard to make certain that those of you in this room, the people that you represent, businesses across the country, customers across the country, recognize Wichita and Kansas as the air capital of the world. The long history there is really began in general aviation, and today we employ thousands of Kansans at Cessna, at Learjet, and at the changes have occurred so dramatically. We add to that Airbus and Spirit Aerosystems and all the subcontractors that make a huge difference in the supply chain for aviation and aerospace across the country and around the world. And we want to do everything we can to highlight that. Mr. Feldman indicated my committee assignments. We worked hard to be in a position to influence decisions made in Washington, D.C. With the Defense Committee appropriations, with our efforts in regard to CJS. You know, I've been the ranking member or chairman of 5 appropriations subcommittees. I had the opportunity to become the chair of CJS, and my analysis consisted of one thought. Richard Shelby found value in this place. There must be value here. And I have a little inclination of moving again until something much more remarkable might happen. And so delighted to share some of my thoughts with you in regard to aerospace and aviation. We had a wonderful event, a reception at the Paris Air Show, highlighting Kansas and Wichita in particular for its contributions to aviation and aerospace. And just last week at Wichita State, we had Jim Bridenstine, the NASA administrator, and contractors and suppliers from across the country in regard to, in fact, Mr. Bridenstine, Administrator Bridenstine, made the announcement. His remarks were about the next 50 years of the first day in NASA, and we were delighted to have that occur in our state. What I might do, particularly with my tardy arrival, is just outline a couple of issues that are important to me in aviation. I will precede that by just kind of an overview of where I think we are in the United States Senate and a path down the future. And then, if it's satisfactory with you, take your questions and comments as best I know how. I do 105 town hall meetings, one in every county in Kansas. I'm accustomed to complaints, to suggestions, to marching orders and instructions. At one point in time, I was the only Republican senator having town hall meetings in the country during the Affordable Care Act debate. I'm very accustomed to difficulties. And I was in a town of 500 people. There were 300 people who showed up at the town hall meeting. Almost none of them from the town in which the town hall meeting was occurring. But also joining us was the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and a Dutch television station. I was worried what havoc I had contributed to this community in Kansas, a nice peaceful place in the northwest part of our state. So I went back a week later and walked Main Street to apologize for the mess of what I had brought upon them.
Nice.
And fortunately, Kansans are very forgiving. Their response was, well, the convenience store sold out of chicken fried steak. Please do it again. I would guess that New York Times reporter had never had a chicken fried steak before, but we were delighted to have it. So here's what I would say about where we are this week. I'm of the view that the Senate will pass this budget agreement. It is not with any ease that will occur. The challenges are significant. We'll have a lot of presidentials out of the Capitol this week, and we'll have a lot of Republicans who are reluctant to support this significant increase in spending. Then the question becomes, if we are unable to do that, I think it's a question that each of us have to decide, then what's the result? And I'm of the view that shutdown and CRs are not ways to conduct business, and the consequences of the shutdown and the CR is a more damning outcome than any process we would go through to get the appropriations process back in shape. We are teed up. I'm anxiously awaiting for my top line number for CJS, as are the other 11. I'm lobbying Senator Shelby to include, I think the path that we will see is the committee will work 12 appropriation bills in the month of September. They will be packaged together. We expect defense and labor H to be the first. There is contemplation that there might be a third bill added to that package, and if we're going to do 12 bills in the month of September, you probably can't do them two at a time and accomplish that. So we're working hard to have CJS included in that first package of bills. While I told you I've been a subcommittee chairman or ranking member in 5 subcommittees in the Appropriations Committee, I've never carried a bill on appropriations on the floor because of this dysfunctional process. And a lot of what I'm about is trying to make sure that the United States Senate resumes its work. That means we have some give and take. It means that Republicans and Democrats work together. It means that you find ways to acquire 60 votes for issues. And it means that members of the Appropriations Committee have to roll up their sleeves and work together. I would tell you that working with my ranking member, Senator Shaheen, is a pleasure, and we get along very, very well. So I would expect those top line numbers for each subcommittee here shortly, and the Appropriations Committee doing its work in September, and bills beginning their path across the Senate floor. I would hope that we would avoid a CR, but I just can't picture in my mind how you accomplish that number of bills in a month's time. So I would guess that something will get caught in the CR, some set of bills, and that's one reason that I want to make sure that CJS is in the early tranche, not in the late tranche. And again, we saw what happens when there are a shutdown occurs. It is damaging to the country, it is damaging to our economy, and it's another black eye on the inability of Congress to do the basics for which we were hired. I would mention trade because Mr. Feldman did. I do think it's one of the most significant issues that Congress faces, certainly as a Kansan. Conclusion of agreements, the agreement with Mexico and Canada is hugely important to us. Mexico is the #1 purchaser of agriculture commodities from our state. Canada is the #1 purchaser of manufactured goods and agriculture commodities from our state. And we desperately need Speaker Pelosi to bring that legislation to the floor of the House. And I believe if she did, and I'm relying on the experts' opinions, that it would pass the House. And I think if there was a vote in the United States Senate, that would occur as well, the approval. I'm anxious for whatever conversations can take place between the United States and China. The consequences of the tariff battles are real. I cut a ribbon on the 10,737 fuselage in Wichita 6 months ago at Spiro Aerosystems. That fuselage is all aluminum. Those tariffs on steel and aluminum have consequences as well. The subcommittee that I chair has jurisdiction over the Trade Ambassador, USTR, and the Commerce Department agencies that deal with trade. And we've had a number of hearings in which Ambassador Lighthizer has been before us, and we're trying to use that platform to keep promoting resolution of these trade differences. In regard to aviation, general aviation, to this audience, there's a broad array of interests, but I would tell you that GA never will leave that place in my heart and my brain as so important. And it is often thought of that Moran is a GA guy because of the air capital of the world, the planes that we manufacture in Kansas. There's certainly truth to that, but I have a lot of interest in trying to keep rural America alive and well, and those general aviation airports and the connection that can be made between those small towns and the rest of the world occurs because of general aviation aircraft. It is a way that we can keep rural America connected with the rest of the